Picture this. Your alarm goes off, you reach for your phone, and you just start scrolling through your morning feed.
Right, the usual morning routine.
Exactly. And boom, you are immediately hit with these stories of like tyrannical CEOs, toxic workplace cultures, and just this weird cultural celebration of sheer unapologetic dominance.
Yeah, you see it everywhere.
It honestly feels like the prevailing wisdom out there is that showing any empathy at work is just a fast track to getting walked all over.
It is a really pervasive narrative,
Yeah.
honestly, and it puts just enormous pressure on people to perform this very specific, aggressive version of authority.
Yeah.
There's this cultural current right now that frames genuine care or even service as a fundamental weakness, particularly, when you move up the organizational chart.
And that is exactly why today's deep dive is so crucial. We are pulling from a remarkably comprehensive research article by Dr. Jonathan H. Westover. It's titled Leading with Humanity.
It's a fantastic paper.
It really is. And our mission today is to shortcut your path to understanding how values-based leadership, which, means leading with service, curiosity, accountability, how that isn't just idealistic fluff. It is a hard-nosed, measurable strategic advantage.
Because the stakes here go far beyond just having a pleasant day at the office. I mean, organizations are facing an existential crisis right now.
How so?
Well, the old industrial model, the one that treats humans like interchangeable cogs in a machine, it is actively destroying modern performance.
Well, actively destroying it.
Yes, we try to navigate these highly complex, rapidly shifting knowledge-based problems using a leadership operating system that was designed for like a 19th century textile factory.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to really fix the modern workplace, we first have to confront the cognitive dissonance in how we currently define a strong leader.
Right.
There seems to be this massive disconnect between the leadership style we claim to want and what actually gets rewarded in the wild.
Absolutely. The research highlights a very stark contrast between two core models. On one side, you have what they call dominance-oriented leadership.
Right, the tyrannical boss model.
Pretty much. This framework is entirely about hierarchy maintenance.
Yeah.
It prioritizes rapid-fire commands, unilateral decisions, and it views literally any display of vulnerability as an inefficiency that needs to be eradicated.
I tend to think of dominance leadership like slamming an energy drink.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Right. You get a massive, immediate spike in compliance. People jump to attention, things happen quickly, and that decisive action looks incredible on a short-term quarterly report.
Yes, the short term.
But you are spiking the system. Eventually, you drain the underlying reserves, and it inevitably leads to a massive systemic crash.
That is a highly accurate way to visualize the mechanism at play. And on the other side of that spectrum, you have values-based leadership. This model operates on a completely different frequency.
Like how so?
It actively asks questions. It embraces the reality of human fallibility. And crucially, it structurally creates space for dissent and disagreement.
Which the dominance model absolutely crushes.
Exactly. But the problem, as you mentioned, is the implementation gap. There is a 2021 study cited in the source material revealing that 67% of knowledge workers say their organizations espouse values of collaboration and psychological safety.
Okay, 67% say the company talks the talk.
Right. But only 31% actually experience those values in their day-to-day work.
Wait, that is a staggering drop-off. So over 2/3 are being told they work in a collaborative environment, but less than a third actually feel it.
Yeah, less than a third.
What does that kind of whiplash do to a workforce?
Researchers actually refer to that specific gap as a cynicism breeding ground.
Oh, wow. Cynicism breeding ground. That makes so much sense.
Yeah, because when leadership continuously talks about collaboration in town halls, but then, they promote the manager who uses aggressive dominance to hit their numbers, that cognitive dissonance just shatters trust.
And once trust is gone?
It goes incredibly fast.
Mm-hmm.
And it is notoriously difficult for any subsequent corporate initiative to rebuild it.
But the systemic crash we're talking about isn't just about morale or like people rolling their eyes at a corporate PowerPoint. The source material gets into the actual physical health toll of that dominance model, and it is genuinely disturbing.
The physiological stress responses are alarming, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Employees working under high-control, low-support supervisors show severely elevated cortisol patterns and significant cardiovascular risks.
That is terrifying.
And the data points out that for every standard deviation increase in supervisor hostility, there is a 16% increase in employee health problems within 2 years.
Okay, let's translate that standard deviation part for a second. That essentially means if your boss moves just one noticeable notch up the jerk scale, your likelihood of developing a tangible physical health issue jumps by 16%.
Yes, exactly.
That transcends having a bad day at the office. That is a systemic public health issue.
It fundamentally rewires your nervous system to be in a constant state of threat detection.
Which brings us to a major crossroads for you listening right now. If dominance makes people sick and cynical, does being human actually pay the bills?
All right, the bottom line.
Because the cynical view, the one that drives all those toxic CEO stories, is that nice guys finish last in the hyper-competitive corporate world. Like, if you create a supportive environment, don't you just get outmaneuvered by the ruthless competitor?
Well, if we look purely at the empirical data, dismissing humanity-centered approaches as a luxury belief completely misreads the economic landscape.
So the data says otherwise.
Completely. Longitudinal research shows that approximately 40% of consistently high-performing organizations use systematic humanistic practices.
40%.
Okay, now compare that to chronically underperforming organizations. In that bottom tier, less than 15% utilize those practices.
That is a massive difference. The stats in this paper are undeniable, but I want to make sure we understand the why behind them. For instance, the research notes that when leaders demonstrate curiosity and respond constructively to challenges, you see a 37% greater innovation output.
Yes.
I assume that happens because fear kills creativity.
Precisely. If you are terrified of being ridiculed for a bad idea, you will only pitch the safest, most incremental updates. Innovation requires failure.
Right. You have to take swings.
Exactly. If a leader punishes failure, they extinguish innovation right at the source.
And the paper also notes that when decisions are made inclusively, independent assessors rate those decisions as 35% more effective.
Which is huge.
It makes total sense because you avoid the echo chamber. If a CEO only talks to yes men, they develop massive blind spots. But inclusive decision-making brings in the people who actually touch the product, and they can spot a multi-million-dollar flaw before it even ships.
The visibility aspect is critical here. When people fear retaliation for raising a concern, vital information just never reaches the decision makers.
Right.
You end up with a leadership team flying completely blind, totally convinced they are executing a perfect strategy, while the structural integrity of the system is quietly crumbling beneath them.
But I want to play devil's advocate for a moment because I can hear the skepticism from some of you listening. Isn't this just like country club management?
I hear that a lot.
Like, if a leader focuses all their energy on creating a safe space, doesn't that inherently mean we are lowering our standards? Do we stop holding people accountable because we're terrified of hurting someone's feelings?
This raises an important question, and it really targets the most common misconception about this entire philosophy.
Okay, lay it on us.
Psychological safety is absolutely not about lowering standards or eliminating accountability. It is strictly about interpersonal risk-taking.
Meaning you can admit a mistake without fear of character assassination.
Exactly. It means you can say, I completely messed up this client presentation, or, I think the strategy we just agreed on is flawed, without fear of being humiliated or instantly fired.
That makes a lot of sense.
High standards actually require psychological safety to be met. Because if you have high standards but low safety, you just get people hiding their errors to survive.
Covering their tracks.
Exactly. And the economic resilience data proves this. Companies that utilize these humanistic approaches recover from major economic downturns 60% faster than their competitors.
60% faster?
Yes, compared to the ones who default to the standard panic-driven layoff and restructure playbook.
That's the perfect pivot, actually. Because it's incredibly easy to be a humanistic, values-based leader when profits are soaring and everyone's getting a fat end-of-year bonus.
Oh, sure. Anyone can be nice then.
Right. The true test of a system is what happens when the sky is falling. So how does a leader maintain this humanity when the economy tanks and layoffs seem mathematically inevitable?
To answer that, we should look at the manufacturing company Barry Wehmiller. During the 2008 financial crisis, they faced a sudden, just terrifying $30 million shortfall.
Wow, $30 million.
Yeah. The standard industrial playbook dictates that you instantly execute mass layoffs to protect the balance sheet.
Which is the immediate reflex for most boards. Cut the headcount, save the core.
But their CEO, Bob Chapman, took a radically different path. He utilized transparent communication, and we need to be clear about what that actually means.
Right. It wasn't just an email.
No, he didn't just broadcast a sanitized PR statement. It was a genuine bidirectional exchange. He gathered the workforce, shared the actual unfiltered math of the shortfall, and explicitly acknowledged the terrifying reality of the situation.
So he treated them like adults.
Yes, the message was essentially, here is the exact problem we are facing. How do we solve it together?
And because he didn't treat them like children to be shielded from the truth, the workforce actually stepped up. They proposed a collective furlough program.
It was incredible.
Every single person, from the factory floor all the way up to the executive suite, took several weeks of unpaid leave. They shared the pain evenly.
They did?
And as a result, they saved every single job, met the financial requirement, and that immense shared sacrifice eventually helped propel the company's growth from $1.3 billion to over $3 billion in revenue.
That outcome was only possible because Chapman had spent years building the infrastructure of trust. I mean, you cannot suddenly ask for shared sacrifice if you have spent the previous 5 years leading through dominance.
Right. People would just laugh and walk out.
Exactly. Another vital mechanism for navigating crisis or difficult decisions is what organizational psychologists call procedural justice. And Patagonia provides a masterclass in this concept.
I want to dig into this because procedural justice sounds a bit academic, but the application is fascinating.
It really is. When Patagonia considers launching new product lines or making major supply chain changes, they don't just let the executives decide behind closed doors.
Okay, so what do they do?
They use cross-functional teams that meticulously evaluate the environmental and worker impacts right alongside the traditional financials.
Oh, interesting.
Now, the executives still retain the formal authority to override those teams' recommendations, but if they choose to do so, they are required by the company's internal rules to provide and permanently archive a detailed, transparent explanation for why they overrode the team.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because procedural justice is such a universally human desire, it perfectly mirrors the dynamics of parenting.
Oh, how so?
Think about the fundamental difference between a parent yelling because I said so and a parent who sits down, looks their kid in the eye, and takes 5 minutes to explain the reasoning behind a rule.
Right, the respect aspect.
Even if the team or the kid doesn't get the outcome they wanted, the sheer respect of being told the why creates psychological buy-in. It prevents resentment.
That process signals profound respect. It communicates to the employee, your perspective is valued beyond your instrumental ability to just execute this one specific task.
Which goes a long way.
It does. And that systemic respect for process is a massive contributor to Patagonia's famously low turnover rate at their headquarters, which sits under 4% annually.
Under 4%.
Yes. In the modern retail and apparel industry, that number is almost statistically impossible.
Okay, so transparent communication and explaining the why builds trust. But to truly lead with humanity, an organization eventually has to put its money where its mouth is. They have to hand over actual tangible control and actual economic security to the people doing the work.
This is the crucial transition from good intentions to systemic design, because a humanistic culture cannot survive inside a coercive bureaucracy.
Give me an example.
If we look at Virginia Mason Medical Center, they realized that the traditional hierarchy was actually harming patients, so they completely dismantled the standard healthcare power structure.
You mean the one where senior doctors are viewed as unquestionable deities?
That's the one. They implemented a system modeled after the Toyota production line where anyone could pull the emergency brake.
But wait, apply that to a hospital. You're saying a nurse, a technician, or even a custodian could literally stop a complex medical procedure if they saw a safety issue.
Yes, anyone.
Doesn't that risk costing the hospital thousands of dollars in delays if the custodian is just wrong?
It does carry a financial risk in the moment, but you have to weigh that against the catastrophic cost of a surgical error.
Ah, right.
Virginia Mason decided the risk of a delay was acceptable. They mandated that anyone could stop the line with zero fear of professional retaliation, and every single alert had to be thoroughly investigated within 24 hours. They prioritized safety over ego.
And what was the result of that radical decentralization of power?
A 74% drop in serious safety events.
Wow. 74%.
Yeah. When you give people the actual authority to protect the system, they will protect it.
That is radical trust in action regarding physical safety. But what about economic security? Because money is the ultimate arbiter of the trust dynamic in a workplace.
The most polarizing case study on economic trust is gravity payments.
Oh, I remember the media firestorm around this.
It is huge.
Dan Price, the CEO, instituted a $70,000 minimum wage for every single employee in the company. and he slashed his own $1 million salary down to $70,000 to help fund it.
He did it.
Critics were screaming from the rooftops. I remember pundits on financial news networks swearing it would be a disaster, predicting that all his high performers would resent the wage compression and instantly quit.
What's fascinating here is that those critics completely misunderstood the psychology of scarcity. The prevailing dominance model views adequate compensation merely as a carrot, a reward to be dangled for high performance.
Right.
But the humanistic model views economic security as an enabling condition for performance.
It reminds me of how a computer's RAM works.
Okay, tell me more.
If you have a computer and 90% of its RAM is being eaten up by a background virus, you can't open any high-level creative software. The system just freezes.
Sure.
For an employee, survival anxiety is that background virus. If you are constantly calculating how to pay rent or terrified of an unexpected grocery bill, that consumes a massive amount of your cognitive bandwidth. You cannot innovate if you are just trying to survive.
That analogy perfectly captures the neurological reality. Because when you remove that survival anxiety, you suddenly free up all that trapped cognitive bandwidth.
Right.
The employees at Gravity Payments now had the mental space to actually focus on doing extraordinary work. And the business metrics validated the psychology.
The numbers were wild. Revenue doubled. Customer attrition dropped by half. Voluntary turnover was cut to a third of the industry average, and their inbound job applications skyrocketed tenfold.
Which is just incredible.
And beyond the corporate metrics, employees started buying homes for the first time. They started having families. It proved that basic economic security isn't some separate HR-related issue. It is the literal foundation of leadership.
It is the foundation because it proves to the employee that the organization views them as a human being with a life, not just an expense on a spreadsheet.
So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, I want to work for a company like that, or I want to be a leader who builds a team like that, how do we ensure this approach actually survives?
That's the challenge.
Because we've all seen a department with one genuinely amazing human-centric boss, but the second that boss gets promoted or leaves, the vacuum is filled, and the whole culture reverts back to a toxic dominance model overnight.
You were describing the localized excellence problem.
Right.
To prevent a culture from evaporating when one good leader leaves, you have to fundamentally rewire the institutional plumbing. Specifically, you have to change the selection criteria for who gets promoted.
Which most companies get wrong.
In a lot of companies, the system accidentally promotes dominance behaviors because they reward individuals who are exceptionally good at aggressive self-promotion rather than the people who quietly elevate the performance of the team around them.
Which is exactly what the Cleveland Clinic realized. They completely overhauled how they promoted their doctors.
They did. They recognized a hard truth. Extreme clinical eminence, being the absolute best surgeon in your field, does not naturally translate into knowing how to lead a complex, high-stress care team.
It's a completely different skill set.
Exactly. So they changed the plumbing. They required that any nominated physician had to complete a rigorous leadership academy before they could be promoted.
And this wasn't just like a weekend retreat with trust falls, right? This was heavy focus on psychological safety, emotional intelligence, and team dynamics.
Exactly. And it was a strict, non-negotiable prerequisite. If you didn't pass, you didn't advance, no matter how good your surgical metrics were. The structural result was that departments led by graduates of this academy saw 31% fewer formal employee grievances. They institutionalized the culture by ensuring you literally could not acquire power unless you possess the relational capabilities to handle it.
So they fixed the promotion pipeline. But what about the fundamental relationship between the company and the employee? Because the old unwritten rule was, give us your absolute loyalty and we will give you a job for life.
Yeah, that implicit contract is entirely obsolete. Microsoft, under the leadership of Satya Nadella, provides a brilliant example of how to evolve this. They transitioned to what organizational scholars call an employability contract.
Okay, break that down for me. Because as a manager at Microsoft, my goal is to train my best employees so well that they become incredibly attractive to our competitors. That feels completely counterintuitive. Why would I want to make it easier for them to leave?
Because if you try to trap them by artificially limiting their growth, they will leave anyway and they will resent you for it.
What?
The employability contract acknowledges the modern reality. Employment might be temporary, but mutual growth must be guaranteed. Microsoft began evaluating their managers not just on output, but on how effectively they developed their direct report skills for the future.
even if that future is outside Microsoft.
Exactly. Whether that future is a higher role inside Microsoft or a massive opportunity outside the company.
That requires a massive leap of faith. You are investing in their capability, trusting that the culture you build is so compelling they will want to stay, even when they have the skills to go anywhere else.
It creates a culture of immense loyalty, precisely because you aren't demanding it through coercion. And supporting that kind of growth requires an organization to possess a structural purpose that transcends just generating profit.
Which brings to mind companies like REI closing all their stores on Black Friday, literally the most profitable shopping day of the year, and paying their employees to go spend time outdoors. Or WL Gore, the company behind Gore-Tex.
WL Gore is fascinating because they operate using a lattice organization.
And a lattice organization, just to visualize it, means they completely removed the traditional corporate ladder. Instead of a hierarchy where a boss tells you what to do, it's more like a web. Authority isn't based on your title. It's based on your actual expertise and your ability to attract a team to your idea.
The structure itself distributes authority. Employees essentially choose which leaders and projects they want to follow. And neither REI's Black Friday closure nor WL Gore's lattice structure are mere PR stunts.
Right, it's baked into their DNA.
Yes. REI's cooperative ownership model legally allows them to prioritize their humanistic mission over maximizing quarterly shareholder returns. WL Gore designed their entire corporate charter to prevent the very existence of a coercive bureaucracy. They institutionalized humanism into the legal and structural DNA of the company.
So what does this all mean for you? If you are evaluating a new job offer, or if you are managing a team right now and wondering why things feel stuck, you need to look way past the glossy mission statement on the wall. You need to inspect the structural pipelines. How is compensation actually handled? What happens structurally when a low-level employee points out a mistake? Who is actually getting promoted, and what behaviors did they use to get there? Organizations aren't just machines that output widgets. They're living, breathing social systems.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, treating people as fully realized humans at work is not a soft luxury. It is an absolute strategic clarity.
Say more about that.
The human costs of dominance-oriented leadership, the rampant burnout, the physical health crises, the damaged personal relationships, those costs do not just vanish when people clock out. They are externalized.
They bleed into real life.
They're pushed onto families, onto local healthcare systems, and onto our communities. When leaders choose curiosity, when they choose discipline, and when they choose kindness, they aren't merely building a more resilient, profitable company. They are actively strengthening the civic infrastructure of society at large.
It changes everything when you view empathy and support as core infrastructure rather than just a nice-to-have soft skill. Then that leaves us with one final thought to mull over, building on that concept of Microsoft's employability contract.
I love this concept.
Think about your own career trajectory right now. What if the ultimate mark of a truly great leader isn't someone who tries to trap you in your current role by hoarding your talents? What if the goal of leadership is intentionally making you so incredibly skilled and so undeniably valuable that you could leave for a better offer at any moment, yet they create a culture so supportive, so intellectually stimulating, and so deeply human that you consciously choose to stay?
It's a powerful shift.
It really is. How would that fundamental paradigm shift change the way you interact with your boss or how you lead your own team tomorrow morning? Thank you for joining us as we explored these sources today. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.